A live-in nanny had spent 8 years caring for a wealthy family's child. 8 years of sleeping in a converted closet. 8 years of 14-hour days. 8 years of wages so small they barely covered the bruises she hid beneath her starched uniform, bruises from Anthony Marchetti, Margaret Harrington's nephew, who used her as his personal punching bag whenever he visited. He knew no one would believe a nanny over a man with money and connections. She was nobody. Then in a single night, everything shattered. Accused of stealing $85,000 she never touched. Her name destroyed by whispers spreading through San Francisco's wealthiest circles like poison gas through a sealed room. Cast onto the streets with nothing but $200 in crumpled bills and a coat so thin it barely held together. The scars on her back ran in every direction like a map of hell that no one had ever seen. At 3:22 in the morning on a November night, the rain fell like blades of ice against the windows. The diner sat empty except for one person. Cassandra Winters occupied a cracked vinyl booth with checkered black and white tiles stretching across the floor beneath her feet. Neon lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects, casting red and blue reflections across wet pavement visible through rain-streaked windows. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hung thick in the stale air. Her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone stone cold an hour ago, maybe longer. She had lost track of time the way drowning people lose track of which direction is up. $200 lay on the table in front of her. Crumpled bills. This was everything. This was her entire world reduced to paper and desperation. The diner door crashed open. A man stumbled through, soaked completely through, expensive black coat clinging to his broad shoulders like a second skin. His hand pressed hard against his side. Blood spread between his fingers, dark and spreading, seeping through the torn fabric of his white shirt. The wound was deep. The knife had done serious work. He was dying. Everyone in that diner could see it written in the way he moved, each step deliberate, controlled, the movement of a man fighting his own body's betrayal. He collapsed against the counter. Cassandra did not hesitate. She did not think. She moved the way people move in emergencies, without the interference of calculation or fear. She stood. She removed her coat, the only coat she owned, thin, worn, patched at both elbows, and pressed it hard against his wound. Her hands came away red. Warm red. Living red. "Stay with me," she whispered. Her voice shook but remained steady, the voice of someone who had held frightened children through fever nights, who knew how to speak calm into darkness. "Look at me. Stay with me." He turned his head. His eyes found hers. They were dark, storm dark, the color of a sky before lightning strikes. He studied her face like he was memorizing something essential, something that might not exist tomorrow. His breathing came shallow, labored, each exhale a visible effort. "Who are you?" His voice emerged thick and fractured, like thunder heard from very far away. "Someone who is not going to let you die," she said. His eyes closed. She kept pressure on the wound. Blood soaked through the coat, through her hands, the warmth draining from it with each passing second. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed above them, indifferent. The rain continued its assault on the windows. No one else was there. No one was coming. There was only Cassandra Winters, a woman with $200 and a coat with holes in it, holding together a stranger's life with nothing but her hands and an absolute refusal to move. But what she did not know was that the dying man bleeding onto those checkered black and white tiles was Dante Castellano. The Dante Castellano. The most feared Korean-Italian Mafia boss in San Francisco. A man whose name was spoken in whispers in corridors of power. A man whose empire stretched through 5 boroughs like the roots of something ancient and terrible. A man whose single word could erase people from existence without leaving a trace. And this single act of kindness, this coat, these hands, this steady whisper in the dark, would unravel everything. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning. 8 years before that November rain. 8 years before the knife and the blood and the diner at 3 in the morning. We return to the day Cassandra Winters first walked through the Harrington mansion doors, to the moment her cage was built around her, one beautiful brick at a time. 8 years earlier, the San Francisco fog rolled thick and heavy across the city like a living thing. Cassandra Winters stood outside a mansion in Pacific Heights, her only suitcase sitting on the marble step beside her. She was 26 years old but looked older. Her eyes carried the weight of someone who had learned early that the world kept score and that she was always losing. She wore a black interview dress that had been tailored for someone else once, altered now to fit her smaller frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid so tight it pulled at her temples. Her hands, already calloused despite her youth, shook slightly as she rang the doorbell. A woman answered. Margaret Harrington. 58 years old but looking meticulously preserved, the way wealthy people can preserve themselves indefinitely if they have enough money and enough distance from actual suffering. Her blonde hair did not move when she turned her head. Her face held the smooth, stretched quality of someone who had erased 40 years of living with precision and injections. She wore a dress that cost more than Cassandra's monthly salary would be. She looked down at Cassandra the way a person might look at a piece of furniture that had been delivered to the wrong address. You must be the nanny candidate, Margaret said. Come in. We do not have all day. The mansion swallowed Cassandra whole. Rooms connected to rooms, all of them vast, all of them filled with things that seemed designed purely to demonstrate that someone had money. Paintings that probably had their own security systems. Furniture that looked like no human had ever actually sat on it. Cassandra's shoes clicked against marble floors, each footstep announcing her smallness in this enormous space. We need someone dependable, Margaret said, walking 3 steps ahead so Cassandra had to hurry to keep pace. Someone who will not become attached or sentimental. The previous nanny made the mistake of thinking she was part of this family. We had to let her go. You understand the difference between employment and family, I assume? Yes, Cassandra said quietly. Your references are acceptable, though sparse. Where did you work before? 2 families. In Sacramento. And before that, I was at Mercy Hospital in the children's ward. Margaret glanced back. Hospital. That explains it. You are comfortable with difficult situations. They reached the kitchen. It was large enough to be a restaurant. A man sat at the table reading the morning paper, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. He was perhaps 35, with the kind of handsome face that had never had to try, dark hair, clean features, the confidence of someone who had never been told no. He wore an expensive suit even though it was 6 in the morning. His name was Anthony Marchetti, Margaret's nephew. He did not look up when they entered. Anthony, this is the nanny candidate. She has hospital experience. He turned the page of his newspaper. Does she have a name? Cassandra, Margaret said, answering for her. Cassandra Winters. Cassandra. He finally looked up, and when he did, Cassandra felt something cold move through her chest. His eyes carried a particular kind of darkness, the kind that existed in people who understood themselves to be exempt from consequences. That is a tragic name, did you know? The mythological Cassandra could see the future but no one ever believed her. Everyone dismissed her warnings. She was destined to be right and alone. The silence that followed felt like it had weight. You will sleep in the staff quarters, Margaret said. 3rd floor, East Wing. The child's room is adjacent. Ava is 6 years old. She can be difficult. She lost her mother 3 years ago, and children never fully recover from that kind of absence. You will work 6 in the morning until 8 in the evening, 6 days a week. Sundays off. Your room and meals are provided. Your salary is $1,200 per month. $1,200. Cassandra's hands unclenched slightly. She had been living on half that in Sacramento, sharing a studio apartment with 2 other women, eating whatever they could afford. When do you want me to start? She asked. Now, Margaret said. That was 8 years ago. The staff quarters were not quarters at all. They were a converted closet on the 3rd floor, East Wing, exactly as described. Cassandra's suitcase fit perfectly on the single bed. She could touch both walls simultaneously if she extended her arms. The window was small and faced a brick wall. But it was hers. For the first time in her life, she had a private space, even if that space was barely larger than a grave. She met Ava in the afternoon. The child stood in a large playroom surrounded by toys that had never been opened, books that had never been read, games still in their original packaging. Ava herself was small, blonde, with her mother's face according to Margaret, though Cassandra thought she saw something of her lost mother's sadness rather than just her face. The child watched Cassandra enter with the expression of someone who had learned that people left. "Hello, Ava," Cassandra said, kneeling down to the child's height. "I am going to be taking care of you now. That means we will spend lots of time together." "You will leave too," Ava said. "Not a question. A statement of fact." Cassandra did not contradict her. She simply said, "Show me your favorite toy." As the weeks became months and months became years, Cassandra discovered that 8 years of sacrifice could be measured in specific ways. In the number of 14-hour days worked without complaint. In the bruises that appeared on her arms and back whenever Anthony visited, bruises she covered with long sleeves and careful positioning. In the way her shoulders curved inward as if she was perpetually bracing for impact. In the $200 she had managed to save, dollars accumulated so slowly, so painfully, that each one felt like a small miracle. But measured in another way, 8 years of sacrifice could be reduced to one thing: Ava's voice saying "Mama" for the first time, 3 nights ago, when fever burned through the child's small body and Cassandra sang lullabies for 12 consecutive hours without stopping. Ava's hand reaching for hers. Ava's complete, total trust. That was everything. Then Margaret brought her nephew into the kitchen one morning and handed Cassandra a piece of paper. A handwritten list of debts. And a voice cold as winter: "You borrowed $40,000 from a loan company 12 years ago. The man who holds that debt has decided to call in favors. There are others. The total comes to $85,000. Cassandra stared at the list, her vision blurring. "You have 3 days to produce the money. If you do not, we will have no choice but to send Ava to foster care. Those are the legal consequences. We cannot have a criminal living in this house." "But I would never." 3 days, Margaret repeated. That night, Cassandra packed her suitcase. She left a note in Ava's toy box, a note that read, "I love you, Mama," back to her, because some truths deserved to be written down even if they could never be spoken aloud again. $200 in her pocket. 1 coat on her back. No place to go except a diner that stayed open all night, where she could sit in a booth and pretend she was warm. That was where Dante Castellano found her, bleeding and dying, at 3:22 in the morning on a November night when the rain fell like blades wrapped in ice. 8 years earlier, on a morning when the fog rolled thick through San Francisco's Pacific Heights neighborhood, Cassandra Winters stood at the iron gates of the Harrington mansion with a single suitcase in her hand and a job offer she could not refuse. $42,000 a year to be a live-in nanny. It was more money than she had ever imagined holding. She was 22 years old, and she had not slept in 36 hours because the bus from Sacramento cost $73 and she had spent the remaining money on a new blouse without stains, on shoes without holes, on the appearance of a person who deserved to work in a house like this. Margaret Harrington stood in the marble foyer wearing a pearl necklace and a smile that never reached her eyes. She was 63, with silver hair arranged in a style that cost $300 every 6 weeks, with hands that had never scrubbed a floor or washed a dish in her entire life. Behind her stood 6-year-old Ava, small and serious, with dark curls and eyes the color of autumn leaves, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed to tatters. "You'll be living here now," Margaret said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You'll work 6 in the morning until 8 at night. Ava needs structure. Consistency. A mother figure, since her own mother passed." She paused, her lips tightening. "Though of course, you are not her mother. You are the help. Keep that distinction clear." Cassandra nodded, her throat dry. She had worked 3 jobs to save enough for the first month's rent on an apartment she would never afford. This was salvation in human form. "Come," Margaret said, turning toward the staircase. "I'll show you to your room." The stairs climbed endlessly, past oil paintings of dead Harringtons, past windows that overlooked the entire city, past rooms with furniture that belonged in museums. Then Margaret stopped before a narrow door on the 3rd floor and opened it. Cassandra stepped inside and her hope died a small, quiet death. It was a converted closet. 6 feet wide, 8 feet long, with a single cot pushed against one wall and coat hangers still mounted on the opposite wall where clothes had once hung. There was no window. No drawer. Just darkness compressed into a human shape. "You'll keep it clean," Margaret said. "Ava's nursery is 2 doors down. She tends toward night terrors. You'll respond immediately when she cries. You will not disturb the rest of the household." Cassandra set down her suitcase. The corner of it touched the opposite wall. "Yes, Good. Dinner is at 6. You'll eat in the kitchen after we finish. Now come. Ava should meet you properly." The nursery was painted soft yellow, like sunlight that had been captured and stored in paint cans. A white crib stood against one wall, and Ava sat cross-legged on an expensive rug, still holding her one-eared rabbit. Margaret introduced them with the same tone she might use to introduce a new dishwasher. That first night, Cassandra stood in the doorway of that yellow room and watched Ava sleep, and something shifted in her chest. It was dangerous, that feeling. It was hope. The weeks became months. Cassandra taught Ava to read using picture books she borrowed from the library, her voice soft and patient as the child sat against her chest. She braided Ava's dark curls every morning, fingers gentle on the child's scalp, making patterns of 3 that became patterns of 4. She sang lullabies in the darkness when Ava's night terrors came, when the child woke screaming about monsters in the shadows, about falling through empty air. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word," Cassandra sang, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring." Ava's small hand would grip Cassandra's sleeve, and the terror would slowly drain from her face, replaced by the profound peace of a child who believed completely in her mother's ability to stop the world from being terrifying. But Cassandra was not her mother. Margaret reminded her of this constantly. "Don't let her become attached to you," she said once, coldly, while Cassandra was scrubbing floors on hands and knees. "You'll only disappoint her when you leave." 3 months ago, everything changed. Ava collapsed during lunch at her school, small body burning with fever. The call came at 4 in the afternoon. Cassandra was in the kitchen, preparing Margaret's evening tea, when the phone rang. Her hand started shaking before she even heard the words. "St. Mary's Hospital. Room 317. 104 degrees. Possible pneumonia." Margaret was in Paris for a charity gala. The house staff told Cassandra to go, told her that clearly she was the only person the child had. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Ava lay in a bed that was far too large for her small frame, her dark curls matted to her forehead, her breathing shallow and rapid. Cassandra pulled a plastic chair close to the crib rails and sat down, and she did not leave for 72 hours. One night. Then another. Then a third, and the world blurred into the soft beeping of machines and the sound of Ava's breathing, shallow and struggling. Cassandra dampened a cloth with cold water and pressed it against the child's forehead, smoothing it across skin that felt like it might melt from fever. She sang. She whispered. She poured everything she had accumulated in 22 years of living into this one fragile child. At 2 in the morning on the 3rd night, as rain fell against the hospital windows like stones wrapped in cloth, Ava's eyes fluttered open. Just barely. Just enough to see. Her small hand lifted from the blanket and reached toward Cassandra's face, fingers brushing her cheekbone, her jaw, as if mapping the face she had loved without knowing she was allowed to love it. "Mama," Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. "Love you, Mama." The words stopped time. They stopped breathing. They stopped the entire world from spinning. Cassandra froze with her hand over Ava's, terrified that any movement might shatter this moment into something that could not be reassembled. "I love you too, sweetheart," she said, and tears ran down her face in rivers that had nowhere to go. "I love you so much. More than anything." She did not know that Anthony Marchetti was standing in the doorway, watching. She did not know that he had been observing her from the crack between the door and its frame for over a minute, watching this nanny pour her entire soul into a child that would never truly be hers. She did not know that he was memorizing this moment, storing it away like a weapon, waiting for the precise moment when he would need to use her love against her. Anthony Marchetti was Margaret's nephew, 31 years old, with dark eyes that held no kindness and a mouth built for smiling cruelty. His suits cost more than Cassandra's annual salary. His shoes were Italian leather. His watch was gold, heavy on his wrist like a piece of his own importance. He had started visiting the mansion 2 years ago, always late at night, always moving through the halls with the confidence of someone who owned the place, or someone who believed he would own it someday. The first time he cornered her had been at midnight in the kitchen. She was cleaning up after a dinner party, her hands moving through dishwater that had gone cold, when she heard footsteps on the marble floor. She looked up and saw him leaning against the counter, watching her with an expression like hunger. "Working late, Cassandra," he said. "Not a question." She straightened, dried her hands on her apron. "Just cleaning up, sir." He moved closer. His cologne smelled like money and menace. "You know what I like about you." His hand reached out and grabbed her wrist, twisted it slowly, a rotation that made pain bloom like flowers blooming in fast motion. "You never scream. Such self-control. Such discipline." She bit down on her tongue until she tasted blood. She did not scream. He smiled and released her wrist, and a bruise began forming immediately, spreading across her pale skin like watercolor bleeding through paper. Interesting. Very interesting. That was the beginning. 8 years of visits. 8 years of a pattern that became as predictable as the sunrise, except it happened in darkness. He would appear without warning. The kitchen. Her closet room. Once, the laundry room while she hung sheets that were larger than she was. Each time his hands found her, each time he explained to her in a voice like venom that she could not tell anyone, that no one would believe a nanny over a man with money and connections, that Ava would be taken away if she made accusations, sent to foster care, raised by the system. She learned to wear long sleeves in summer. She learned to move carefully so the bruises on her ribs did not press against her uniform and announce themselves. She learned to lie about split lips and swollen eyes. Walked into cabinet doors. Fell downstairs. Was clumsy and careless and deserved what she got. 2 weeks ago, Anthony had appeared in the kitchen on a Thursday evening. He was holding a piece of white paper, a handwritten list of numbers in black ink. His smile was the smile of a man who had finally solved a puzzle. "Your debt to the Harrington family," he said, handing her the paper. Cassandra read. The number seemed to grow as her eyes moved down the page. $40,000 to a loan company. 12 years of compound interest. Then others. A credit card she did not remember opening. Medical bills from a hospital she had never visited. The total, written in his careful handwriting, came to $85,000. "But I never," she started. "Doesn't matter," Anthony said, and his voice was the voice of law, absolute and final. "Prove otherwise. You have 3 days to produce the money. If you don't, we'll have no choice but to turn this over to the police and have Ava placed in state custody. Foster care can be very difficult for sensitive children, I understand. Violence, neglect. And you, of course, will be charged with theft and fraud." He left the list on the kitchen counter, and the paper seemed to glow with its own terrible light. That night, Cassandra packed her suitcase. She had $200 in her pocket, savings accumulated penny by penny over 8 years. She had a coat that was thin at the elbows. She had the clothes on her back and nothing else. Before she left, she went to Ava's room one final time. The child was sleeping, one arm flung across her stuffed rabbit, breathing the deep, peaceful breathing of children who believe the world is safe. Cassandra found a piece of paper and a pen, and she wrote in letters she made as careful as prayer. She left it in Ava's toy box, beneath the blocks and the dolls and the things that a child loves without knowing that love could be taken away. Then she walked out into the San Francisco night, into the fog that rolled like living breath through the streets, into the darkness that seemed to open itself around her like hungry hands. She had nowhere to go except a diner 3 blocks from Market Street that stayed open all night, a place with checkered floors in black and white and neon signs that buzzed like trapped insects, where a person could sit in a booth and pretend she was warm, pretend she belonged somewhere, pretend her life was not collapsing into dust. It was at 3:22 in the morning on a November night when Dante Castellano walked through that diner's door, bleeding from a knife wound that had not stopped, his white shirt turning red, his hand pressed against his ribs, his face pale as bone. The fog rolled through San Francisco like a living thing, curling around the diner's neon sign, swallowing the empty streets. Inside, the black and white checkered floor gleamed under buzzing lights that hummed like trapped insects, and Cassandra Winters sat in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around cold coffee she could not afford. The cup steamed in front of her. She had counted her money 3 times. $200. That was everything. The November wind clawed at the windows. Outside, the city breathed rain and darkness. Inside, the diner was empty except for an old man behind the counter, his apron stained with decades of grease and time, his eyes focused on nothing in particular. The clock read 3:22 in the morning. That was when the door opened. Dante Castellano walked through it like a man who had been bleeding for hours. His white shirt was turning crimson, his hand pressed against his ribs, his face pale as bone beneath dark hair. He moved toward the counter with the deliberate steps of someone whose body was betraying him, and he collapsed into the nearest stool. Cassandra did not think. She stood. She moved across that checkered floor like her feet belonged to someone else, someone braver, someone who did not understand fear. She was at his side before her mind caught up to her hands. "Where are you hurt?" Her voice came out steady, though her hand shook. He looked at her, dark eyes, intelligent even as death approached. "Call police," he whispered. "No." She pulled off her coat, the thin one with elbows worn transparent, and pressed it against his wound. Her fingers went slick with blood that was warm and real and terrifying. "Tell me what to do." His hand caught hers. The grip was surprisingly strong. "My phone." "Side pocket." "Dial the number on the lock screen." "Say nothing. Just wait." Cassandra pulled out the phone with her free hand. Her thumb trembled as she entered the number. A voice answered before the first ring finished. A man's voice, sharp as a blade. "Boss? Send Rocco and Gino. The diner on Market. Now." The line went dead. The diner owner stared from behind the counter, his face the color of old milk. "Should I call police?" "That's blood, that's a lot of blood, I should call." "No," Cassandra said. She kept the coat pressed against Dante's ribs. "Just stay quiet. Help me keep him sitting." For minutes passed like years. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows. The old man's hand shook as he brought a clean towel. Cassandra used it to apply pressure, her voice soft but steady, speaking to Dante like she was soothing a frightened child. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming. Stay with me. Keep your eyes on me." His eyes did not leave hers. When the black SUV pulled up outside, 2 men moved through the rain like they had been forged from violence itself. Rocco was the larger one, 48 years old, thick neck, a scar running through his left eyebrow like a second mouth. Gino came behind him, 35, lean and cold, his eyes the color of winter. They burst through the diner door and froze. Their boss was sitting on a stool in a diner at 3:26 in the morning, bleeding through a homeless woman's coat. Rocco's hand moved toward his jacket. Cassandra stepped in front of Dante without thinking. "The wound is deep," she said, her voice cutting through the shock. He needs a hospital. Real doctors. Real equipment. Rocco and Gino exchanged a glance, a language of 15 years of service compressed into a single look. Neither had ever heard a stranger give their boss orders. Dante's grip tightened on Cassandra's wrist. Your name? Cassandra Winters. You saved my life, Cassandra Winters. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a vow. I don't forget debts. They lifted him with practiced efficiency, moving toward the SUV. Rocco paused at the door, his eyes returning to Cassandra. He studied her face, the exhaustion carved into every line, the bruise fading yellow on her cheekbone, the way she held herself like someone trained to take up as little space as possible. He pulled $500 bills from his wallet and placed them on the counter. For the coat. Then, as if something in his mind had shifted, he asked, Where do you live? Cassandra looked at the $200 still on her booth table, all she owned in the world. The diner. The rain-soaked streets. The nowhere that had become her address. Nowhere, she answered. Rocco nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. He was already pulling out his phone as he climbed into the SUV. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, swallowed by rain and darkness, leaving Cassandra standing in the diner with a stranger's blood drying on her hands and her only coat riding away into the San Francisco night. What she did not know was that Rocco had been watching her for 3 weeks. The surveillance started as routine, background work on the Harrington family, standard procedure for any family that drew the organization's attention. But 3 weeks of watching had revealed something that made Rocco pause his reports. He had seen footage of Cassandra in the backyard of the Harrington mansion, teaching a small girl about constellations, singing lullabies in the darkness, loving that child with a tenderness that belonged in a different world entirely. He had watched her tuck the girl into bed while Margaret Harrington screamed at her from down the hallway. He had seen her bruises. Now Rocco sat in the backseat of the SUV while Gino drove and Dante bled onto leather seats, and he made a phone call that would change everything. Boss. Before we get to the private hospital, you need to know something about the woman who saved your life. 3 days later, Cassandra sat on a bench in Golden Gate Park, rain soaking through her thin sweater, her hands so cold they had stopped shaking. In her pocket was a handwritten list, creased and worn from being read 100 times. $85,000 in debt. 2 days remaining before arrest warrants would be served. Before Ava would be placed in foster care. Before the Harringtons' plan reached its final, devastating conclusion. She counted her remaining money, $143. The black SUV pulled up to the curb without warning. Rocco stepped out, rain streaming down his face, his massive frame moving with purpose toward her bench. Miss Winters. Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you. She stood slowly, every muscle aching. I didn't save him for a reward. I don't want his money. He knows that. Rocco gestured toward the vehicle. Come anyway. The Castellano estate rose from Presidio Heights like a fortress. Stone walls, wrought iron gates, guards positioned at every corner with the stillness of men trained to watch and wait. Rocco led Cassandra through halls lined with paintings and leather, past rooms that cost more than her entire lifetime of wages, to a study that smelled of old wood and fireplace warmth. Dante Castellano sat behind a desk of dark mahogany, expensive black suit buttoned despite the bandages visible at his neck. His dark eyes tracked her movement across the room. There was no weakness in him now, only the careful power of a man accustomed to command. Sit, Miss Winters, he said, gesturing to a chair. She remained standing. Why am I here? Her voice was steady, but her hands curled into fists at her sides. Because 3 nights ago, you saved my life without asking who I was. Without caring what I am. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I want to know why. You were dying. That's all that mattered. He rose slowly and moved around the desk, stopping a few feet away. You're hurt. It was not a question. I'm fine. You're lying. He paused, his gaze traveling over her face, her posture, the way she favored her left side. "Tell me about the Harringtons." Her face went white. Blood drained from her lips. "How do you know about?" "I know everything, Cassandra." His voice remained calm, but each word landed like a blade. "I know you worked for them 8 years. I know about Ava, the 6-year-old girl you love more than you love breathing. I know about the debt they claim you owe. $85,000 in 3 days, or the child goes into foster care. I know Anthony Marchetti has been visiting that house, and I know what he does to you when Margaret Harrington looks away." She backed toward the door. "I need to leave." "And go where?" His voice followed her like a living thing. "You have $143, Cassandra. No home. No family. Nowhere to run." The numbers hit her. He knew the exact amount. Every detail of her collapse was known to this man. Gino entered moments later, carrying a silver tray with tea. Dante watched as Cassandra's hands trembled around the cup, watched as steam rose and fogged her vision, watched as she tried to become smaller. "Rocco investigated the Harringtons for me," Dante said softly. "They've been manufacturing evidence against you for months. False receipts. Forged signatures. They're building a criminal case." "Why would they?" "Because Margaret Harrington discovered that Ava loves you more than she loves her own grandmother." His eyes darkened. "And because Anthony Marchetti enjoys hurting people he believes are powerless." Cassandra's cup shattered on the Persian rug. Hot tea spread across the floor. Her control fractured like the porcelain. "Show me your back," Dante said. "No. Cassandra. Show me." She turned slowly, lifted her sweater. The scars were a geography of violence, raised white lines, burn marks, thin knife cuts accumulated like a ledger of pain. Her shoulders curved inward, protective, ashamed. Dante's hands curled into fists, but his voice remained soft. "Who did this?" "It doesn't matter. No one would believe me." "I believe you." When she turned back, her eyes were wet. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody." Dante stepped closer. "You're the woman who gave her only coat to a dying stranger. You're the woman singing lullabies to a child in the dark. You're somebody, Cassandra. You always were." Gino entered and whispered something that made Dante's face harden like stone. "Anthony Marchetti filed criminal charges 30 minutes ago. Warrant for your arrest has been issued." But what Cassandra did not yet understand was that a man who had locked himself away from the world for 3 years had just decided to open that door. That a man who believed in darkness had just seen light. And that no force in San Francisco, not the police, not the Harringtons, not death itself, would stand between Dante Castellano and the woman who had taught him how to feel again. Morning broke cold and gray across San Francisco, the kind of November dawn that feels like it's stealing light rather than offering it. Cassandra woke in a bed softer than any she had known in 8 years, beneath blankets that smelled like lavender and cost more than her monthly rent used to be. For 3 seconds, she forgot where she was. For 3 seconds, she was still in the converted closet at the Harrington mansion, listening for Margaret's footsteps, bracing for the day ahead. Then Mia burst through the door like a small tornado wrapped in pink pajamas, her dark curls wild, her smile demolishing the quiet of the morning. She was 6 years old and moved through the world like she had never learned to doubt herself. "Cassandra! Cassandra, are you awake?" "I'm awake. I've been awake for 17 minutes and Daddy says breakfast is ready and there are pancakes and I think you should eat pancakes." Mia climbed onto the mattress, bouncing slightly, testing the give of expensive springs. "Will you stay forever?" Before Cassandra could speak, before she could promise something she had no right to promise, footsteps approached from the hallway. Measured, unhurried. Dante appeared in the doorway, still dressed from the night before, his dark eyes carrying the weight of hours without sleep. He watched Cassandra braid Mia's hair with her slender fingers, watched the gentleness in her touch, the patience she poured into each strand like it was prayer. His daughter's face tilted up toward this woman, trusting and open, the way children only are when they have learned that love is real. breakfast," he said quietly. But downstairs, in the kitchen where morning light fell across marble countertops, Rocco appeared. His face was the color of old concrete. He moved directly to Dante and spoke in low Italian, fast and sharp. Dante's expression hardened like stone. Cassandra felt it immediately, the shift in air pressure, the way his men's shoulders tensed, the way Gino's hand moved reflexively toward his jacket. Something had changed. What happened? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Rocco glanced at her, then back to Dante, who nodded permission. "Federal agents executed a warrant at the Harrington mansion 2 hours ago," Rocco said. "Margaret Harrington's accounts are being seized. Wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying evidence. But that's not the immediate problem." Dante's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and his jaw clenched. "Police say you assaulted Margaret. They're saying you kidnapped Ava from school, that you've been keeping her somewhere against her family's will. The charges have been upgraded. Cassandra, there's a warrant for your arrest as of 6 a.m. this morning. Every precinct in San Francisco has your photograph." The kitchen tilted sideways. Cassandra's hands gripped the marble counter, her fingers bloodless. "Ava," she whispered. "Where is Ava?" "Still at the Harrington house. But Margaret has already filed for emergency custody. She's claiming you're unstable, dangerous. The social worker is being sent this afternoon to remove Ava into protective care." "No." Cassandra moved toward the door. "No, I have to go back. I have to protect her. Margaret she'll put her in foster care just to punish me. Ava will think I abandoned her." Dante's hand caught her wrist, gentle but immovable. "You walk out that door, they'll arrest you before you reach the street. They'll destroy you in custody. And you'll still lose Ava. Then what do I do?" Her voice broke. "What do I do?" His dark eyes held hers. "You let me handle this." At that exact moment, 3 miles across the city, Cassandra's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Her hands trembled as she opened it. A photograph. Ava Harrington, age 6, standing in her school uniform with a piece of white poster board. In crayon, in uneven letters, she had written, "I miss you, Mama." Cassandra's knees buckled. She sank into a kitchen chair, phone pressed against her chest, and 3 years of held tears finally broke free. By that afternoon, the rain had come. Not gentle November rain, but the kind that hammered like accusation, like the sky itself was angry. Cassandra stood alone on the pedestrian walkway of the Golden Gate Bridge, water soaking through the borrowed coat that Dante had given her, her hands numb against the railing, her eyes fixed on the churning grey void 40 feet below. She thought about 8 years of bruises. About Anthony's knuckles and Margaret's cruelty and the way invisibility had become her natural state, so complete that sometimes she forgot she was a person at all. She thought about loving children who would never be hers, about scars on her back like a map of someone else's rage, about always being disposable, always being nobody. The water below was the same color as her thoughts. Empty. Endless. She leaned forward slightly. Felt the void pulling. Her eyes closed. Then her phone vibrated. One more text. She opened her eyes. Downloaded the image with shaking fingers. It was Ava, clutching the drawing to her chest, her small face turned toward whoever had taken the photo. But there was something else in the image too, Dante's reflection in the window behind her, his hand on Ava's shoulder, his eyes fixed on the photograph Ava was holding. The text beneath read only, "Not today." Cassandra's body shook with something between sobbing and laughter. She turned away from the railing, walked back toward the living world, and did not look behind her. But what she did not yet understand was that Rocco watched from a black car 50 yards away, that Dante had placed protection detail on her the moment she left the estate, that she was never, not even for 1 second, actually alone. By 9:13 p.m., the Castelliano war room had transformed into a tactical command center. Maps spread across tables. Photographs pinned to walls. Dante stood at the head of the room surrounded by Rocco, Gino, and 12 men dressed in black, their eyes sharp as blades, their loyalty as old as blood. Anthony Marchetti's penthouse, Dante said, pointing to surveillance images. Downtown, 43rd floor, private elevator. He'll be there tonight. He always is. No witnesses after 9 p.m. Rocco laid out timing. Gino checked weapons with mechanical precision. The Marchetti family will retaliate, someone said from the back. Dante's smile was thin and dangerous. They already have. They retaliated the moment they aligned with my enemies. Tonight, we remind them why that was a mistake. At 9:24 p.m. exactly, 12 men in black moved through Anthony Marchetti's building like smoke, like water finding cracks. No alarms triggered. No security guards questioned their entry. The penthouse door opened silently, and they surrounded a man who had spent 8 years breaking bones, spilling blood, and never once imagining that consequences could find him. Anthony sat at his mahogany desk, phone pressed to his ear, laughing about the nanny who thought she mattered, who believed that love could protect her from his family's reach. He didn't hear them enter. Didn't hear the soft footsteps or the calculated breathing. He only saw the shadow when it was too late. Dante Castellano. Anthony's voice pitched upward, fractured with fear. This is Marchetti territory. Not anymore, Dante said. Anthony's hand dove for the desk drawer where his gun lived, muscle memory faster than thought, but Rocco's palm came down like a hammer. The drawer slammed shut. Anthony's fingers crushed beneath the impact. The scream that tore from his throat was animal, was primal, was the sound of a man who suddenly understood that he was completely exposed. Please, Anthony whimpered, cradling his destroyed hand. I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Name your price. Dante crouched to eye level, close enough that Anthony could see the absolute absence of mercy in his gaze. For 8 years you beat her. You scarred her. You made her believe she was nothing. That was your mistake. She was everything. She's just a nanny. Dante's fist broke Anthony's jaw. The crack echoed like a gunshot, and blood sprayed across the mahogany desk like an accusation. Anthony sprawled backward, whimpering, broken. Rocco and Gino hauled him to his feet, dragged him toward the door. His screams echoed down the hallway, down the elevator shaft, and into a depth from which no return is possible. By midnight, Anthony Marchetti had been delivered to the rival family members who had been waiting for exactly this excuse. He disappeared into the San Francisco Bay with concrete shoes and debts paid in blood. He was never found. He was never seen again. Meanwhile, as dawn broke gray and cold the next morning, federal agents swarmed Margaret Harrington's Pacific Heights mansion. FBI vans blocked the street. Neighbors watched from behind silk curtains as the woman who had spent decades untouchable was led out in handcuffs, her designer suit suddenly looking like a costume, her imperious expression cracking like old porcelain. The lead agent read charges in a voice that carried across the marble foyer: wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying evidence, conspiracy to commit perjury, money laundering through shell companies that led directly back to her nephew's criminal enterprise. This is absurd, Margaret hissed. I am a Harrington. My lawyers will. Your lawyers are being arrested too, the agent said. We have 15 years of documentation. Every false receipt you forged. Every signature you manufactured against Cassandra Winters. You're looking at 40 years in federal prison. The perp walk down the marble steps was captured by news cameras. Margaret's face was stone. Her social circle, watching from behind curtains and closed doors, made notes in their phones. By sunset, Margaret Harrington's name was being discussed in whispers that would follow her into a cell, into a future erased from every society page, into a darkness that matched the crimes she had committed. In the Harrington mansion's third-floor nursery, a young social worker sat beside Ava on the edge of a twin bed decorated with yellow stars. The child's small suitcase was already packed. Her stuffed bear sat on top, ready to go somewhere that felt safer. Where are we going? Ava asked, her small voice steady in the way that children are when they trust that someone is finally telling them the truth. The social worker smiled gently. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. To someone who loves you very much." Ava looked up at her with eyes that held too much understanding for a 6-year-old. "To Cassandra." "Yes, honey. To Cassandra." And from somewhere in the city below, in a quiet room where the morning light was soft and forgiving, Cassandra, who had spent 8 years as nobody, as invisible, as disposable, did not yet know that everything had changed. She did not know that Ava was coming home. She did not know that the world had conspired in her favor, that love had found a way to break through. She only knew that she was still breathing. Still alive. Still hoping. And sometimes, that is enough. The garden was cold. November had stripped the roses bare, leaving only thorns and memory. Cassandra Winters sat on a wrought iron bench, her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing and everything at once. The Castelliano estate stretched behind her, a mansion that had once terrified her, now the only place that felt like safety. But safety, she had learned, was a fragile thing. It could be revoked in a single phone call. She did not hear Dante approach until he sat beside her, the bench shifting slightly under his weight. He wore a cashmere coat the color of charcoal, expensive enough to pay her rent for a year. She had stopped flinching at that contrast. "It's over," he said quietly. His voice was steady, like a stone settling into still water. Cassandra shook her head. The gesture was almost imperceptible. Ava's in foster care. Alone. Scared. Margaret's nephew, he disappeared, and now Ava's in the system because I have no legal rights to her, and I'm still nobody, Dante. Nobody. A woman with a criminal record for trespassing, a history of... No. He turned to face her fully. She's not. A black SUV pulled up the driveway, moving with deliberate slowness. The driver was Rocco, Dante's lieutenant, a man whose loyalty had been tested and never found wanting. The rear door opened. A small figure climbed out, clutching a stuffed bear with matted fur, the same bear that had comforted her through fevers and nightmares. Ava's eyes scanned the garden, searching, uncertain. She wore a social services tag on her wrist like a prisoner's number. Then she saw Cassandra. For one heartbeat, the child froze. Time compressed into that single moment, all the separation, all the fear, all the uncertainty crystallizing into the space between them. And then Ava ran. "Mama!" The word tore from her like a prayer answered. Cassandra caught her, dropped to her knees on the cold stone, held her so tight that the stuffed bear was crushed between them. Both of them shaking. Both of them crying. Ava's small fists gripped the fabric of Cassandra's sweater like she was afraid of slipping away into the darkness again. "I missed you, I missed you, I missed you," Ava sobbed into her shoulder, her voice fractured and raw. "I thought you left me." "Everyone leaves." "Never." Cassandra's tears fell into the child's hair, soaking it. "Never. I will never leave you. Never, sweetheart. Never." Rocco withdrew quietly, but in his chest something settled. In 15 years of working for Dante Castelliano, he had never seen his boss sit beside another person like this. And now, watching the boss stand motionless in the garden, watching a homeless woman and an orphan child cling to each other like they were the last two people in the world, Rocco understood that something fundamental had shifted. The most powerful man in San Francisco had chosen love over empire. Mia appeared from the house, the boss's daughter, moving with the careful grace of a child who had learned to walk quietly around grief. When she saw Ava, her face transformed. She ran, her small feet slapping against the stone. "Are you staying? Do you want to play?" Mia asked, already taking Ava's hand, already showing her the garden as if it were a kingdom and Ava were the princess she had been waiting for. Ava looked up at Cassandra, her eyes wide and hopeful and terrified. "Can I stay?" Cassandra looked at Dante. No words. just a question written across her face in every scar she had hidden, every bruise she had endured, every night she had counted pennies and wondered if hope was a luxury she could afford. He nodded. Both of you. For as long as you want. Forever, if you'll have it. Over the next week, healing arrived like rain after drought. Cassandra sat in a therapist's office on Tuesday, in a chair that faced a woman who listened without judgment. Finally, she told someone. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush, years of silence pouring out like water breaking a dam. The bruises Anthony had left. The humiliation Margaret had orchestrated. The way she had made herself smaller and smaller until she nearly disappeared completely. The therapist listened, took notes, nodded, and said the words Cassandra had needed to hear since childhood: what happened to you was not your fault. The pain you carry is real. And you are remarkably strong. Cassandra cried. Real tears. Not hidden ones shed in bathroom stalls or parking lots. Not tears she had to wipe away before anyone saw her weakness. Real tears that poured from somewhere deep, washing away years of pretending she was fine. In the nursery, the room Dante had never dismantled, the shrine he kept to his daughter's childhood, Cassandra taught Ava and Mia to build blanket forts. They constructed kingdoms from quilts and pillows, crawling inside to tell stories in the soft darkness. Both girls called her Mama without hesitation, as if love required no legal papers, no signatures, no permission from the state. The sound of their laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for 3 years. Dante watched from the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light. Rocco stood beside him, arms crossed, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. In 15 years, boss, I never seen you smile like that, Rocco said quietly. I forgot I could, Dante replied. One evening, Cassandra sat in Dante's study. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that had never been read, mahogany shelves that had held his secrets. On the desk between them lay a piece of paper, the handwritten list of debts. $85,000 in fake charges, each figure a threat, each number representing a day closer to losing everything. She picked it up. The paper was thin, ordinary, the kind you could find in any office supply store. But it had felt like a death sentence. She studied the numbers that had terrorized her, the dates scrawled in Anthony's careless handwriting, the casual cruelty of a man who knew no one would believe her if she spoke. Dante handed her a lighter. The metal was warm from his pocket. Burn it. She did. Watched the paper curl and blacken, the numbers turning to ash and smoke. The flame consumed it slowly, deliberately, and with each moment of burning, something inside Cassandra began to heal. Why did you help me? She asked, still holding the lighter, still watching the ashes float upward like dark snow. You didn't know me. I was just a homeless woman in a diner. Dante met her eyes. His gaze was steady, unguarded. You saw a dying man and gave him your only coat. You asked for nothing. Expected nothing. In my world, that doesn't exist. You reminded me that it should. He paused. The silence was the kind that required patience to sit inside. And because my daughter fell in love with you before I even knew your name. Mia never trusted anyone after her mother died. Then she met you and called you pretty lady and climbed into your lap like she'd known you forever. Children see truth adults miss. They see the heart underneath the uniform. Cassandra's eyes filled. I love her too. Both of them. I know. That's why you're family now. What she didn't know was that Dante had already filed adoption papers for Ava, listing Cassandra as co-parent with full legal authority. No social worker could take her. No system could strip her away. Ava belonged to Cassandra now, on paper and in every way that mattered. 6 months later, spring had returned to San Francisco. The roses bloomed again, red and gold and white, each petal perfect. November's darkness felt like a distant nightmare, something that happened to someone else in another lifetime. Cassandra stood in the rebuilt nursery. No longer a shrine to grief. Now a living space painted cheerful blue, 2 beds with matching quilts, toys scattered across hardwood floors like evidence of joy. Ava and Mia played tea party, their small hands arranging delicate cups, their voices high and bright. "Mama, you're the queen," Mia called, and Cassandra sat on the floor between them, no more bruises, no more scars hidden beneath uniforms. She wore a soft sweater in cream, and her smile was genuine. Real. Earned. Dante appeared in the doorway, and the girls' faces transformed. "Papa, you're the dragon," they screamed, tackling him, and he roared, actually roared, a sound so full of joy that it echoed through the house. He chased them around the room, their squeals filling spaces that had known too much silence. Later, after both children slept, Cassandra and Dante sat in the garden where she once contemplated endings. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and possibility. "I keep thinking I'll wake up," Cassandra said softly. "That this is a dream and I'll be back in that closet." Dante took her hand. His palm was warm. "It's real. You're safe. You're home. I gave you a coat. You gave me a life. You gave me something more valuable than life. You gave me back my daughter. My heart. The ability to trust again." He paused. "Marry me." She turned, eyes wide. "What? Not because you saved my life. Not because my daughter loves you. Because I love you. Because you are the bravest, strongest, most compassionate woman I have ever known. Because when you had nothing, you gave everything. Because I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible again." Cassandra's tears spilled over. Yes. At the courthouse, on a morning when sunlight made everything golden, they stood before a judge. Ava and Mia scattered flower petals, giggling, their joy uncomplicated. Rocco and Gino stood as witnesses, actually smiling, their loyalty expanding to include this woman who had changed their boss from a man made of stone into someone capable of softness. When the judge pronounced them married, the girls cheered. Cassandra looked at her family. The daughters she had chosen. The man who chose her. The life she never believed she deserved. "I learned that the worst moments can lead to the best beginnings," she whispered, and Dante heard her, pulled her close. "That kindness is never wasted. That family is not blood, it is who shows up. Who stays. Who sees you when you are invisible to everyone else. Every day we choose between fear and trust, between closing ourselves off and opening our hearts. She taught me to choose trust. She taught me to choose love. And in return, I chose her. Forever." If this story moved your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe because tomorrow we bring you another story of justice, love, and second chances. Comment below, what would you have done in Cassandra's position? We read every single one. Thank you for staying with us. We wish you good health, joyful days, and peace in your heart. See you in the next story.